Hannah Mitchell pressed her forehead against the cool window of the Uber, watching as pristine mansions rolled past like scenes from a glossy magazine. The Hamptons in summer was exactly as she'd imagined. Perfectly manicured lawns, luxury cars, gleaming in circular driveways, and the distant sparkle of the Atlantic Ocean catching the morning light. Her phone buzzed with a text from her roommate. "Don't let the rich people intimidate you. You've got this." She smiled, appreciating the encouragement, but her stomach still churned with nervous energy. This wasn't just another babysitting job. It was a full-time summer position living in one of those mansion-lined streets, caring for a child who'd lost her mother. The weight of that responsibility pressed heavily on her shoulders. The car turned onto Ocean View Drive, and Hannah's breath caught as they approached number 156. The Carter residence stood 3 stories tall, its white exterior gleaming in the summer sun. A wraparound porch bordered by hydrangea bushes gave the mansion a softer touch than its neighbors, but it was still overwhelmingly grand. "This is it," the driver announced, pulling up to the iron gates that slowly opened to welcome them. Hannah smoothed her sundress and checked her reflection in her phone screen one last time. At 24, she looked younger than she'd like, with freckles scattered across her nose and warm brown eyes that her mother always said were too honest for their own good. She'd pulled her chestnut hair into a neat braid, trying to appear as professional as possible. The front door opened before she could ring the bell. A tall man in a perfectly tailored suit stood there, phone pressed to his ear, gesturing her inside with a distracted wave. Michael Carter, she recognized him from the video interview, continued his conversation as she stepped into the foyer, her sandals clicking against the marble floor. "I don't care what the board thinks, Davidson. The merger happens on our terms or not at all." His voice was firm, authoritative, carrying the weight of someone used to being obeyed. He paced the length of the foyer, barely acknowledging Hannah's presence. She took the moment to study him. At 35, Michael Carter carried himself with the confident grace of a man who'd built his empire from the ground up. His dark hair was just starting to gray at the temples, and fine lines around his eyes hinted at sleepless nights and heavy responsibilities. But it was the wedding ring he unconsciously twisted on his finger that caught Hannah's attention, a nervous habit that spoke volumes about the grief he still carried. "We'll discuss this tomorrow. I have a meeting now." He ended the call abruptly and finally turned his full attention to Hannah. "Miss Mitchell, welcome to our home." His steel blue eyes met hers, and Hannah felt the full force of his scrutiny. "Thank you for having me, Mr. Carter. I'm looking forward to meeting Sophie." A shadow crossed his face at the mention of his daughter. "Yes, well, Sophie is—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "She's having one of her difficult days. Mrs. Reynolds, our housekeeper, is with her now." Hannah nodded, understanding the unspoken message. A child dealing with loss couldn't be expected to follow a predictable schedule of good and bad days. "Perhaps we should discuss your duties first," Michael suggested, leading her toward his home office. "Sophie's schedule, emergency contacts, house rules." A crash from upstairs interrupted him, followed by the sound of running feet and a woman's exasperated voice calling, "Sophie, please!" Michael's shoulders tensed, but before he could move, a small figure in purple pajamas darted down the hallway and disappeared into what appeared to be a library. Mrs. Reynolds, a woman in her 50s with graying hair escaping its bun, appeared, at the top of the stairs, looking flustered. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Carter, she refused to get dressed for breakfast again." Hannah watched as Michael's jaw clenched, noticed the way his hands formed fists at his sides before deliberately relaxing. This was a man struggling to connect with his own child, and the realization made her heart ache. "Let me try," Hannah said softly, surprising both adults. "If that's okay?" Michael hesitated, then nodded once sharply. Hannah set her bag down and moved toward the library, her steps deliberately slow and quiet. Through the partially open door, she could see bookshelves stretching to the ceiling and a window seat overlooking the garden. A small sniffle gave away Sophie's hiding spot behind a large armchair. Hannah didn't approach directly. Instead, she settled cross-legged on the floor near the door and spoke in a gentle voice. "You know, when I was little and didn't want to Get dressed, my mom used to tell me the story of the pajama princess. A moment of silence, then a tiny voice asked, "What's a pajama princess?" "Oh, she was quite famous," Hannah continued, keeping her tone light and playful. "She ruled a kingdom where everyone wore pajamas all the time. But one day she discovered that pajamas weren't very good for having adventures. They got too wet for swimming with mermaids, too slippery for climbing trees with monkeys, and too soft for riding dragons." A small face peered around the edge of the armchair. Sophie Carter had her father's blue eyes, but they were wider, softer, filled with a child's curiosity despite the sadness that seemed to linger in them. What happened to her? Well, she had to make a very brave decision. She decided that sometimes, just sometimes, regular clothes could be magical too, especially if they were chosen for special adventures. Sophie emerged fully now, twisting the hem of her pajama top. "I don't want adventures," she whispered. "I want—" She trailed off, but Hannah could fill in the blank. She wanted her mother. "I know," Hannah said gently. "But maybe we could start small, like choosing an outfit for having pancakes. I heard Mrs. Reynolds makes the best blueberry pancakes in all of the Hamptons." Sophie considered this, her small face serious. "With extra syrup? I bet we could negotiate that." Hannah stood slowly, holding out her hand. "I'm Hannah, by the way. I'm going to be staying here this summer, helping you find all sorts of tiny adventures. Would that be okay?" Sophie looked at the offered hand, then past Hannah to where Michael stood in the doorway, watching the interaction with an unreadable expression. Finally, she slipped her small hand into Hannah's. "Can I wear my butterfly dress?" "That sounds perfect for pancake adventures." As Hannah led Sophie upstairs, she caught Michael's eye. Something passed between them, surprise, relief, perhaps a glimmer of hope. But it was gone before she could analyze it, and he was already reaching for his phone again, armor back, in place. Yet as Hannah helped Sophie choose her butterfly dress and listened to the little girl's detailed explanation of why butterflies were better than dragons, she couldn't shake the feeling that this summer would change all their lives, in ways none of them could predict. The thought should have frightened her, but instead it felt like standing on the edge of something extraordinary, something that could either break her heart or heal it completely. And somewhere deep inside, Hannah Mitchell knew she was already falling in love with a sad little girl in a butterfly dress with a house full of secrets and memories, and maybe, just maybe, with the possibility of what could be. 2 weeks into her stay at the Carter residence, Hannah was beginning to understand the rhythm of the household. Mornings belonged to Sophie, pancake breakfasts, getting dressed for the day, and learning to smile again. Afternoons stretched, long and lazy by the pool, where Sophie was slowly regaining her confidence in the water. But it was the evenings that held their own peculiar tension, when Michael Carter returned home and the dynamic shifted, like shadows lengthening across the lawn. Tonight was different. Hannah stood at the kitchen counter, helping Sophie decorate sugar cookies they'd baked earlier when she heard the unmistakable sound of Michael's car in the driveway. It was barely 4 o'clock. "Daddy's home early," Sophie exclaimed, her small hands covered in blue frosting. She started to run toward the door, but Hannah caught her gently. "Let's clean those sparkly hands first, Butterfly," Hannah said, using the nickname that had stuck since that first day. She helped Sophie wash up, trying to ignore the flutter in her stomach at the sound of Michael's footsteps approaching. He appeared in the doorway, jacket off and tie loosened, looking less like a CEO and more like a tired father. His eyes took in the scene, the scattered sprinkles, the messy frosting bags, his daughter's beaming face, and something in his expression softened. "What's all this?" "We made cookies." Sophie ran to him, and Hannah held her breath, watching as Michael hesitated for just a moment before scooping his daughter up. It was these moments that revealed the most, how he was trying, struggling, wanting to bridge the gap that grief had created between them. "Did you save any for me?" he asked, and Sophie nodded enthusiastically. "Hannah taught me how to make flowers with the frosting," Sophie said proudly. "And she didn't even get mad when I made them all blue instead of pink. Blue flowers are very special," Hannah found herself saying, meeting Michael's gaze over Sophie's head. They remind me of someone who's not afraid to be different. Something flickered in Michael's eyes. Recognition, perhaps, of how, well, she'd come to understand his daughter in such a short time. He set Sophie down carefully. Why don't you pick out the best cookie for me to try? While Sophie deliberated over her selection, Michael moved closer to Hannah. You're good with her, he said quietly. Better than... He trailed off, but Hannah knew he was thinking of the string of nannies who hadn't lasted more than a few weeks. She's an amazing child, Hannah replied simply. She just needs people to see her, not the shadow of who they think she should be. Michael's sharp intake of breath told her she'd hit too close to home. Before he could respond, Mrs. Reynolds bustled into the kitchen. Mr. Carter, your mother-in-law is here. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Michael's shoulders tensed, and even Sophie's enthusiastic cookie selection slowed. Hannah had heard about Margaret Carter but hadn't met her yet. From the household's reaction, this wasn't going to be a casual family visit. Margaret Carter swept into the kitchen like a storm front, elegant in a navy dress that spoke of old money and older prejudices. Her eyes landed first on Sophie, softening momentarily, then hardened as they found Hannah. So this is the new Nanny? She said, making the word sound like something distasteful. Rather young, isn't she, Michael? Hannah is a graduate student in psychology, Michael replied, his tone careful but firm. She's been excellent with Sophie. Has she? Margaret moved to Sophie, brushing blue frosting from her cheek. Darling, you're getting crumbs everywhere. Your mother never would have allowed such mess in her kitchen. Sophie's small shoulders hunched, and Hannah felt a fierce protectiveness surge through her. Actually, she said, keeping her voice light, Sophie's been learning about creative expression. Studies show that allowing children to explore through sensory activities like baking can be incredibly beneficial for emotional development. Margaret's head snapped up. I wasn't aware we'd hired a therapist. Mother, Michael warned, but Margaret continued. Claire had very specific ideas about Sophie's upbringing, structure, discipline, proper activities for a young lady. She gestured at the chaos of their baking afternoon. Not this disorder. Hannah watched Sophie's face fall, saw the joy of their afternoon crumbling under the weight of an impossible comparison. Without thinking, she knelt beside the little girl. Hey, Butterfly, why don't you show your grandmother the special cookie you decorated just for her, the one with the blue flower? Sophie brightened slightly, reaching for a cookie she'd set aside earlier. Margaret had no choice but to accept it, though her expression remained pinched. Blue flowers, she said flatly. How creative. Like Daddy's eyes, Sophie explained proudly. And mine. Hannah says they're magic eyes. A heavy silence fell. Hannah felt Michael's gaze on her, intense and unreadable. Margaret's lips pressed into a thin line. Michael, I need to speak with you. Privately. They left the kitchen, but not before Hannah caught the conflicted look Michael cast back at them. She turned to Sophie, determined to salvage what remained of their happy afternoon. Should we clean up our baking adventure, Butterfly? We can save the rest of the cookies for tomorrow. As they wiped down counters and put away ingredients, Hannah could hear the muffled sounds of an argument from Michael's study. Sophie pretended not to notice, but her movements became slower, more hesitant. Hannah, she asked finally, her voice small. Did I do something wrong? Hannah's heart cracked. She stopped what she was doing and faced Sophie fully. No, sweetheart, you did everything exactly right. Sometimes grown-ups just have big feelings they don't know how to handle, kind of like when you feel too many things at once and need a quiet moment in the library. Sophie considered this. Does Grandma Margaret have big feelings about Mommy? The question, so innocent and yet so profound, made Hannah's throat tight. I think everyone has big feelings about your mommy, Butterfly. And that's okay, but you know what? Having big feelings about someone we miss doesn't mean we can't also have happy moments like making blue flower cookies and getting frosting everywhere. Sophie threw her arms around Hannah's waist, burying her face in her sundress. Hannah held her close, breathing in the sweet scent of sugar and childhood that clung to her hair. Later, after Sophie was tucked in bed with a story about a brave princess who painted the world in her favorite colors, Hannah found herself on the back porch. The summer evening was warm, crickets chirping in the meticulously maintained gardens. She heard the door open behind her but didn't turn. "I'm sorry about Margaret," Michael said, his voice rough with exhaustion. "She's having trouble letting go." "Aren't we all?" Hannah replied softly, still looking out at the darkening yard. "But holding on too tightly to what was can make us miss what is." She felt him move closer, sensed his presence at her side. "Sophie laughed today," he said suddenly. "Really?" "Laughed while you were baking. I heard it from my car." His voice caught. "I hadn't heard that sound in so long, I'd almost forgotten." Hannah turned to him then, saw the moonlight silvering the tears he was trying to hide. "She's still here, Mr. Carter. Your daughter is still here, waiting to be found again. And she's so beautiful, so full of life, just like her blue flowers." Their eyes met, and for a moment the night air crackled with something dangerous, something neither of them was ready to name. Michael took a step back, running a hand through his hair. "Thank you," he said formally, the mask slipping back into place, "for being good with her, for understanding." He left her there on the porch, but Hannah could still feel the lingering warmth of his presence, the echo of what had almost passed between them. Above her, stars emerged one by one in the velvet sky, and Hannah wondered if she was only imagining that her heart was beating faster than usual. Inside the house, a light glowed in Sophie's window, her butterfly nightlight casting shadows on the wall. Hannah smiled, knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new moments of joy and pain, new steps in their delicate dance of healing. For now, though, she was content to stand in the summer darkness, holding space for all the unspoken things that floated between the stars. The morning sun painted golden streaks across the pool's surface as Hannah watched Sophie hover nervously at the edge. 3 weeks into summer, and they'd made progress with almost everything except this. The water still held shadows of memories too painful to face. "I don't want to," Sophie whispered, her small toes curling over the pool's edge. She wore a bright yellow swimsuit with ruffles, but her arms were wrapped tightly around herself. Hannah sat on the pool steps, water lapping at her waist. "That's okay, Butterfly. We can just sit here and talk. Did I ever tell you about the time I was scared of elevators?" Sophie's curiosity won over her fear, at least momentarily. "Really? But elevators aren't scary." "They were to me. Every time those doors closed, I felt like the walls were getting smaller." Hannah swirled her hands through the water. "But then my mom taught me a trick. Want to know what it was?" Sophie nodded, taking one tiny step closer to the water. "She told me to count butterflies in my mind. One butterfly for every floor. By the time I imagined all those colorful wings fluttering around me, the doors would open again." "Did it work?" Sophie was at the very edge now, her reflection rippling in the water. "It did. And you know what else? Sometimes the things we're afraid of can become our favorite places to be. Like how the library used to be your hiding spot, but now it's where we read our best stories." Sophie considered this, her blue eyes, so like her father's, fixed on the water. "Mommy used to teach me to swim," she said softly. "She said I was her little mermaid." Hannah's heart squeezed. "She still thinks you're a mermaid, Butterfly. Some things don't change, even when people leave us and promise and cross my heart." Sophie took a deep breath. Can we try the steps? Just the steps?" "Of course we can." With painful slowness, Sophie descended the pool steps, each one a small victory. Hannah kept talking, spinning stories about magical mermaids and underwater palaces until Sophie was sitting beside her, water at her waist. "You're doing so beautifully," Hannah encouraged. "Your mom would be so proud." "She is proud," came a deep voice from behind them. "We both are." Hannah turned to find Michael standing at the pool's edge, still in his business suit despite the early hour. The look on his face as he watched his daughter in the pool was a complex mixture of pride, pain, and something else, something that made Hannah's breath catch. "Daddy!" Sophie called out, excitement overriding her fear. Look, I'm in the pool. I see that, princess. His voice was rough with emotion. You're very brave. Hannah taught me about butterflies, Sophie explained earnestly. They help with scary things. Michael's eyes met Hannah's, holding her gaze for a long moment. They certainly do, he said softly. The intensity of his look made Hannah's cheeks warm. She broke eye contact first, turning back to Sophie. Should we show your dad how we can blow bubbles in the water? They spent the next 15 minutes demonstrating various pool achievements, bubble blowing, hand floating, and Sophie's proud ability to submerge her chin. Michael stayed and watched, his phone forgotten in his hand, tie loosening in the morning heat. When Mrs. Reynolds called Sophie in for breakfast, Hannah helped her out of the pool, wrapping her in a fluffy towel. Go on, Butterfly. I'll be right there. Sophie scampered inside, leaving Hannah alone with Michael. She was suddenly very aware of her wet swimsuit and dripping hair. You're a miracle worker, Michael said, breaking the silence. The last time she went near the pool, he trailed off, pain flickering across his features. Hannah stepped closer, leaving wet footprints on the concrete. She's healing, Mr. Carter. We all heal differently, but we do heal. Michael, he said suddenly. Please, call me Michael. The request hung in the air between them, waited, with meaning neither of them was ready to acknowledge. Hannah nodded, trying to ignore the way her pulse quickened. She talks about Claire, she said gently. When she's ready, when she feels safe. I think that's good. The memories shouldn't be something we hide from. Michael's hands clenched at his sides. I've been hiding, he admitted, not just from the memories, but from her, from Sophie. I see Claire in her face, in her laugh, in the way she scrunches her nose when she's thinking hard about something. And sometimes it hurts so much I can barely breathe. But you're here now, Hannah pointed out. You stayed and watched her in the pool. That matters, Michael. It matters so much. He took a step toward her, then seemed to catch himself. I have a meeting, he said abruptly. But Hannah, thank you for giving her back her smile. She watched him leave, his tall figure disappearing into the house. Only then did she release the breath she'd been holding, sinking onto one of the pool chairs. The morning sun was warm on her skin, but it wasn't the heat making her feel lightheaded. Later that afternoon, while Sophie napped, Hannah found herself in the kitchen with Mrs. Reynolds. The housekeeper was preparing dinner, her movements efficient and practiced. He hasn't been in the pool area since Miss Claire passed, Mrs. Reynolds said quietly, not looking up from her chopping. Not once in 3 years. Hannah stilled, a glass of water halfway to her lips. I didn't know. No one did until today. Mrs. Reynolds set down her knife, finally meeting Hannah's eyes. Things are changing in this house, Miss Mitchell. I see it in Sophie's smiles, in the way Mr. Carter comes home earlier, in how the silence isn't quite so heavy anymore. Is that a good thing? Hannah asked, thinking of Margaret's disapproval. Change is neither good nor bad, dear. It simply is. But healing? The older woman smiled. Healing is always good, even when it hurts. That evening, after Sophie was asleep, Hannah walked the grounds of the Carter estate. The gardens were beautiful in the twilight, roses releasing their fragrance into the cooling air. She found herself back at the pool, its surface mirror-smooth in the gathering darkness. A splash of yellow caught her eye. Sophie's pool toy, forgotten on a chair. As Hannah went to retrieve it, she noticed something else, a photograph partially hidden beneath a towel. She recognized Claire immediately. The woman in the photo was laughing, her arms around a younger Sophie in the pool, both of them sun-kissed and joyful. But it was the careful way the photo's edges were worn that caught Hannah's attention, as if someone had held it often, tracing the contours of lost happiness. Michael must have dropped it earlier. Hannah's throat tightened as she realized he'd been carrying it with him, perhaps gathering courage from it as he watched his daughter brave the water again. She set the photo carefully on the table where he would find it, but not before a drop of water fell on its surface. Hannah touched her cheek, surprised to find tears there. She was crying, she realized, for a woman she'd never met, for a little girl learning to swim again, and for a man standing at the edge of his own deep water trying to remember how to dive in. Inside the house, a light flicked on in Michael's study. Hannah watched his silhouette move across the windows, strong and solitary. Something tugged at her heart, an ache, a yearning, a recognition of kindred spirits learning to trust the Yao. Water again. Sweet dreams, butterfly, she whispered to Sophie's darkened window. Then, more softly still, good night, Michael. The stars emerged one by one above her, their light reflecting in the pool like scattered diamonds. Hannah stayed a moment longer, listening to the night sounds of crickets and distant waves, feeling the weight of all the unspoken words that floated in the space between grief and hope, between what was and what could be. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new steps forward, and maybe some steps back. But tonight, Hannah let herself believe in the possibility of healing, in the power of butterfly counting and bubble blowing, in the way love could slip through the cracks of a broken heart and make it whole again in entirely new ways. The invitation sat on Michael's desk like a ticking bomb. Hannah watched his face as he read it, noting the tension gathering at his jaw. Through the study window, she could see storm clouds building over the ocean, mirroring the darkness in his expression. I can't take her, he said finally, setting down the elaborate card. The company merger is at a critical stage. This weekend is impossible. It's her cousin's birthday party, Hannah reminded him gently. She's been talking about it all week. Michael ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Hannah had come to recognize as frustration warring with guilt. I know, but the board meeting, I could take her, Hannah offered, if you're comfortable with that. His eyes met hers, startlingly blue against the gray light filtering through the windows. To the Riverside Country Club? With Margaret? There? The implied warning was clear. Margaret Carter had made her disapproval of Hannah increasingly obvious over the past month, but Hannah thought of Sophie's excitement about the party, the way she'd practiced her twirls in her new party dress. I can handle Margaret, Hannah said with more confidence than she felt. Sophie shouldn't miss this. Thunder rumbled in the distance as Michael studied her. Something shifted in his expression, trust perhaps, or recognition of the determination in her voice. All right, he conceded. But take the car service. And Hannah? He hesitated. Be careful. Margaret can be ruthless when she thinks she's protecting this family. Hannah nodded, trying to ignore the warmth that spread through her chest at his concern. As she turned to leave, his voice stopped her. How do you do it? She looked back. Do what? Always know exactly what Sophie needs, He cut himself off, but the unfinished thought hung heavy in the air between them. Before Hannah could respond, a small whirlwind in a purple dress burst into the study. Hannah, look what Mrs. Reynolds helped me make. Sophie held up a string of paper butterflies, each one carefully colored in shades of blue and purple. For the party, Cousin Lily loves butterflies too. Hannah knelt to admire the craft, aware of Michael watching them both. They're beautiful, butterfly, just like you. Can I show Daddy? Michael's entire demeanor softened as Sophie approached his desk. He lifted her onto his lap, examining each paper butterfly with exaggerated seriousness. These are quite extraordinary. Did you do all this coloring yourself? Hannah showed me how to make the colors blend, Sophie explained proudly, like how Mommy used to paint. The room went still. Hannah held her breath, watching Michael's face. These moments came sometimes, innocent mentions of Claire that could either shatter the peace or strengthen their healing. Michael's arms tightened around his daughter, but his voice remained steady. She would have loved these, Princess, especially the blue ones. Sophie beamed, then frowned as thunder cracked louder. Is it going to storm? Looks like it, Hannah said, moving to the window. But you know what? I bet we have just enough time to build a blanket fort in the library before it hits. Sophie's eyes lit up. Can we have hot chocolate with marshmallows? I think that can be arranged. Hannah glanced at Michael. Would you like to join us, Mr. Carr? Michael? The invitation surprised them both. Michael looked at his phone, at the stack of papers on his desk, then at his daughter's hopeful face. Please, Daddy, Sophie added. Hannah makes the best forts. She says they're magic and safe from all storms. Something in Michael's expression cracked open. I suppose the merger documents can wait an hour. They spent the next 30 minutes transforming the library into a cozy haven. Blankets draped. Between chairs created secret spaces. Cushions formed comfortable nests. And Mrs. Reynolds appeared with a tray of hot chocolate and cookies, her eyes twinkling at the sight of her employer on his hands and knees, helping to arrange pillows. As the storm intensified outside, they huddled in their fort. Sophie sat between them, sipping hot chocolate and getting marshmallow on her nose. Hannah told stories about brave knights and princess scientists, while Michael added sound effects for the thunder and dragons. More scary, Sophie instructed when Michael's dragon roar wasn't quite impressive enough. He complied, making her giggle and curl closer to Hannah. Lightning illuminated the library, and Sophie jumped. Without thinking, Hannah reached out, her hand finding Michael's in the darkness behind Sophie's back. She meant to squeeze it reassuringly and let go, but his fingers interlaced with hers, holding on. The touch sent electricity through her that had nothing to do with the storm. She could feel the warmth of his palm, the slight tremor in his fingers that suggested he was as affected as she was. Tell the one about the butterfly princess again, Sophie requested, oblivious to the current running between the adults. Hannah began the story, her voice only slightly unsteady. Michael's thumb traced small circles on her hand as she spoke, the intimate gesture hidden by blankets and shadows. She forced herself to focus on the tale, on Sophie's rapt expression, but every point of contact with Michael's skin felt like a live wire. The story ended and Sophie's head began to droop. Just a little nap, she mumbled, curling into Hannah's side. I should carry her up to bed, Michael said softly, but he made no move to let go of Hannah's hand. Let her rest a bit longer, Hannah whispered back. She feels safe here. Their eyes met in the dim light of the fort. Michael's face was closer than she'd expected, his expression unguarded in a way she'd never seen before. We all do, he murmured. The air between them grew thick with unspoken words. Hannah could feel her heart pounding, could see the same struggle she felt reflected in Michael's eyes. He leaned forward slightly, and for one breathless moment, she thought. A particularly loud crack of thunder startled Sophie awake. Michael released Hannah's hand as if burned, the moment shattering like glass. Storm's getting worse, he said roughly, standing and nearly taking down part of the fort. I should get Sophie to bed. Hannah watched him lift his sleeping daughter, noting how his hands trembled slightly. At the library door, he paused. Hannah? Yes? Thank you. For everything. He disappeared into the darkness of the hallway, leaving Hannah alone in the fort. She touched her hand where she could still feel the ghost of his touch, then began slowly dismantling their shelter. Outside, the storm raged on, but Hannah barely heard it over the thunder of her own heart. She was in dangerous territory now, falling not just for a grieving man and his daughter, but for the idea of them as a family, a dream as fragile as paper butterflies in a storm. Later that night, unable to sleep, Hannah stood at her bedroom window. The storm had passed, leaving the air heavy with the scent of rain and possibility. Across the garden, a light still burned in Michael's study. She watched his silhouette, move past the window, and wondered if he too was thinking about the moment in the fort, about the way their hands had fit together in the darkness. A sound drew her attention to the hallway, soft footsteps padding past her door. She opened it to find Sophie clutching her blanket. Bad dream, the little girl whispered. Can I stay with you? Hannah lifted her into her arms, breathing in the sweet scent of children's shampoo and innocent trust. Of course, Butterfly. I'll keep the bad dreams away. As they curled up together in Hannah's bed, Sophie already drifting back to sleep, Hannah realized with startling clarity that she would do anything to protect this child's heart, even if it meant guarding her own. The Riverside Country Club gleamed like a jewel in the summer sun, its pristine lawns stretching toward the water. Hannah smoothed Sophie's party dress one last time before they stepped out of the car, noting how the little girl's fingers tightened around her string of paper butterflies. "Ready, Butterfly?" Hannah asked softly. Sophie nodded, though her other hand gripped Hannah's sundress. "Will Grandma Margaret be mad that Daddy didn't come?" "Your dad is working hard on something very important," Hannah reminded her. "And he'll want to hear all about the party when we get home." They walked through the club's grand entrance, Hannah acutely aware of the scrutiny they received. She recognized several faces from the society pages, the elite of the Hamptons, all gathered for young Lily's birthday celebration. Margaret Carter's voice cut through the ambient chatter. "Sophie, darling, come give Grandma a kiss." Sophie dutifully went to her grandmother, who was resplendent in a pale blue designer dress. Margaret's smile faltered when she saw Hannah. "I wasn't aware you would be attending," she said, her tone arctic. "Where is Michael?" "He sends his regrets," Hannah replied evenly. "The merger required his attention, of course." Margaret's lips thinned. "Well, I suppose the help is better than nothing." Sophie tugged at her grandmother's sleeve. "Look what I made for Lily." She held up her paper butterflies proudly. Margaret's expression softened slightly. "Lovely, dear. Though perhaps next time we'll buy something from Bergdorf's like Claire would have done." Hannah saw Sophie's face fall and stepped forward. "I think handmade gifts are special because they come from the heart. Don't you agree, Mrs. Carter?" Before Margaret could respond, a young girl in a pink party dress came running over. "Sophie, you came." "Lily." Sophie's entire demeanor brightened. She looked questioningly at Hannah, who nodded encouragingly. "Go have fun, Butterfly. I'll be right here." As the girls ran off together, Margaret turned her full attention to Hannah. "I've been meaning to have a word with you." "Mrs. Carter." "You're becoming too involved," Margaret cut in. "I've seen the way you look at Michael, the way you're trying to replace Claire in Sophie's life." Hannah felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I would never try to replace Claire." "Wouldn't you?" Margaret's voice was silk over steel. "The devoted nanny healing the grieving widower's heart? It's rather cliché, don't you think?" "That's not what this is." "No?" Margaret sipped her champagne. "Then why does my granddaughter talk about you constantly? Why does Michael come? Home early now? Why are there suddenly sounds of laughter in a house that was finally learning to properly honor Claire's memory?" Hannah struggled to keep her voice steady. "With all due respect, Mrs. Carter, grief isn't meant to be a permanent state. Sophie deserves to laugh. She deserves to live fully, to remember her mother with joy instead of just pain. And you think you're qualified to make that decision?" Margaret stepped closer. "Let me be clear. Claire was everything Michael and Sophie needed. She was grace, sophistication, proper breeding. You're a temporary distraction. A summer, romance at best and a mistake at worst." The words hit like physical blows, but Hannah stood her ground. "Sophie is healing. She's swimming again, making friends, finding her smile. If you truly love her, how can you not want that for her?" "Don't you dare question my love for that child," Margaret hissed. "I lost my daughter. I won't let some college girl with a savior complex ruin what's left of her family." A commotion from the party area interrupted them. Sophie came running over, tears streaming down her face. "Hannah," she sobbed. "I broke it. I didn't mean to." Hannah knelt immediately, gathering Sophie into her arms. "What happened, Butterfly?" "The crystal butterfly," Sophie hiccuped. "The one on Lily's cake. I just wanted to look at it, but it fell and it shattered." Margaret made a disapproving sound. Claire would have taught her to be more careful with precious things. Something in Hannah snapped. She stood, keeping Sophie close. And Claire would have taught her that accidents happen, that things can break and still be fixed, that love doesn't depend on perfection. The words echoed in the sudden silence. Several party guests turned to stare. Margaret's face went white with fury. "How dare you presume to know what Claire would have done," she said, her voice trembling. "You're fired. I'll speak to Michael myself." "You can't fire me," Hannah replied quietly. "Only Michael can do that." "We'll see about that." Margaret pulled out her phone. "Michael, yes, there's been an incident. You need to come to the club immediately." Hannah felt Sophie trembling against her and made a decision. "Come on, Butterfly, let's get some air." They walked out to the club's garden, finding a quiet bench overlooking the water. Hannah helped Sophie clean her face with a tissue. "Am I in trouble?" Sophie whispered. "No, sweetheart. You're not in trouble at all." Hannah brushed Sophie's hair back from her face. "Want to know a secret? I once broke my mom's favorite vase. I was so scared she'd stop loving me." "Did she?" "No. She hugged me and helped me clean up the pieces. Then we made up a story about how the vase wanted to become stardust instead." Sophie's tears slowed. "Really? Really? Sometimes the best things in life come from broken pieces." Hannah pulled Sophie closer. "Your mom knew that too. I bet. She had her own stories about broken things that turned into something beautiful." They sat together, watching boats sail past on the sparkling water. Hannah could feel her heart racing, knowing that soon Michael would arrive, that choices would have to be made, that the delicate balance they had all been maintaining might shatter like that crystal butterfly. The sound of rapid footsteps on the garden path made them both look up. Michael stood there, his tie askew, looking like he'd run from the parking lot. "Sophie? Hannah? Are you all right?" "Daddy." Sophie ran to him. "I'm sorry about the butterfly." Michael lifted her easily, his eyes finding Hannah's over Sophie's head. "Your grandmother said, she told me." "I know what she told you," Hannah said softly, standing. "But maybe you should hear our side first." Something in his face changed, determination replacing uncertainty. "Mother," he called out, and Hannah realized Margaret had followed him. "This stops now." "Michael, be reasonable." "No." His voice was firm. "You don't get to make these decisions anymore. Not about Sophie, not about who I hire, and certainly not about who I—" He broke off, but his eyes never left Hannah's face. Margaret stepped forward. "She's turning Sophie against Claire's memory. She's making you forget. She's helping us remember how to live." Michael's voice cracked. Claire would have wanted that. She would have wanted Sophie to laugh, to make paper butterflies, to swim again, to break things and know she's still loved. Tears spilled down Margaret's cheeks. "I can't lose her again. I can't lose what's left of my daughter." The anger drained from Michael's face. "You're not losing Claire, Mother. We're learning to carry her differently. And Hannah?" He shifted Sophie in his arms, reaching out to take Hannah's hand. "Hannah is helping us find our way." The touch of his hand sent warmth spreading through Hannah's chest. She squeezed his fingers gently, offering silent support. Margaret looked at their joined hands, then at Sophie's tear-stained but peaceful face. Something in her rigid posture softened, just slightly. "The crystal butterfly," she said finally. "It was an antique." "I'll replace it," Michael began, but Margaret held up a hand. "No, perhaps some things need to break so new things can grow." She touched Sophie's cheek gently. "Your mother broke things too, when she was your age. Did I ever tell you about her father's pocket watch?" Sophie shook her head, eyes wide. "Come," Margaret said, her voice different now, softer, though still touched with pain. "Let me tell you about it while your father and Hannah sort things out." They watched Margaret lead Sophie back toward the party, the little girl's hand trustingly in her grandmother's. "I'm sorry," Michael said quietly. "I should have been here." "You're here now," Hannah replied. Their hands were still joined, neither willing to let go first. When Mother called? When she said you were trying to replace Claire? He turned to face her fully. I realized something. Hannah's heart stuttered. What? You've never tried to replace anyone. You've just made space. Space for Sophie to be herself. Space for me to remember Claire without drowning in grief. Space for something new to grow alongside what was lost. Their eyes met, and this time there was no storm, no interruption, no reason to pull away. Michael's free hand came up to cup her cheek. Hannah, he whispered, and her name on his lips sounded like the beginning of something both terrifying and beautiful. The kiss, when it came, tasted of salt. Tears neither of them had realized they were crying. It was gentle, hesitant, full of questions and answers and promises they weren't ready to voice. They broke apart at the sound of distant laughter. Sophie's voice mixed with Lily's, floating on the summer breeze. Hannah rested her forehead against Michael's chest, feeling his heart racing beneath his shirt. What happens now? She asked softly. I don't know, he admitted. But for the first time in 3 years, I want to find out. Above them, butterflies danced in the garden air. Real ones, their wings catching the sunlight like shards of crystal, turning broken things into something new and unexpectedly beautiful. Dawn crept over the Hamptons, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Hannah stood at her bedroom window, fingers pressed to her lips where she could still feel the ghost of yesterday's kiss. The events at the country club felt almost dreamlike, in the early morning light, but the churning in her stomach was very real. Her phone buzzed with a text from Michael. Coffee on the beach? We should talk. Hannah's heart jumped. After the party, they'd driven home in separate cars. Michael, with Sophie, Hannah alone with her thoughts. They'd barely spoken, the weight of what had happened hanging between them like a delicate glass ornament neither dared to touch. She found him waiting by the private path to the beach, 2 coffee cups in hand. The sight of him in casual clothes, jeans and a light sweater instead of his usual suit, made him seem younger, more vulnerable. Hi, she said softly, accepting the coffee he offered. Hi. His voice was rough, like he hadn't slept much either. Walk with me? They made their way down to the water's edge, where the morning tide was leaving lacy patterns in the sand. For several minutes they walked in silence, the only sounds being seabirds and gentle waves. Sophie asked about us this morning, Michael finally said. Hannah nearly stumbled. What did she say? She wanted to know if you were going to be her new mommy. The words hung in the air like smoke. Hannah's throat tightened. Michael. He stopped walking, turning to face her. I told her that you were someone very special who loved her very much, but that these things are complicated and take time. Was that the right answer? I hope so. He ran a hand through his hair. Hannah, yesterday at the club, I don't regret kissing you, but I need you to understand something. She braced herself, expecting him to say it was a mistake, that they needed to maintain professional boundaries. Instead, he reached for her hand. Claire was my first love. We grew up together, built a life together, had Sophie together. When she died, I thought that was it, that I'd used up all my capacity for love in one spectacular burst. I convinced myself that being hollow was better than risking that kind of pain again. Hannah squeezed his fingers, encouraging him to continue. But then you came along, he said softly. With your paper butterflies and your healing stories. You didn't try to fill the hollow places. You just showed me how to live with them, how to build something new around them. Michael, she whispered, her voice catching. I'm not ready to name this thing between us, he continued. It's too new, too fragile. And Sophie has to come first. Always. Of course she does. But I want to try. He lifted their joined hands, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. Slowly, carefully, if you're willing. Before Hannah could respond, a familiar voice called from the path above them. Hannah, Daddy, look what I found. They turned to see Sophie running toward them, something clutched in her hands. Mrs. Reynolds followed at a more sedate pace, giving them a knowing look. That made Hannah blush. "What have you got there, Butterfly?" Hannah asked as Sophie reached them. "A shell. It's perfect for your collection." Hannah knelt to examine the slightly battered scallop shell Sophie proudly displayed. "It's beautiful, but I don't have a collection." "Not yet." Sophie's eyes sparkled with excitement. "But we can start one together. And maybe—" She hesitated, glancing at her father. "Maybe we could look for shells every morning, all of us." The hope in her voice made Hannah's heart ache. She looked up at Michael, finding her own uncertainty reflected in his eyes. "I think," he said carefully, "that would be a wonderful new tradition, if Hannah wants to join us." "I'd love to," Hannah replied, her voice steady despite the emotions threatening to overwhelm her. Sophie beamed, then frowned slightly. "Can we invite Grandma Margaret sometimes too?" Hannah and Michael exchanged surprised looks. After yesterday's confrontation, neither had expected Sophie to want Margaret involved in their morning ritual. "Why do you want Grandma to come, sweetheart?" Michael asked gently. "Because—" Sophie concentrated, forming her thoughts. "Because she told me stories about Mommy yesterday. Good stories, funny ones. And she didn't cry this time. She laughed. And she said—" Sophie's face scrunched up with the effort of remembering. "She said sometimes we have to make new stories too." Hannah felt tears prick her eyes. She hadn't expected Margaret's small gesture of acceptance to bear fruit so quickly. "Of course Grandma can come sometimes," Michael said, his voice rough with emotion. "Now why don't you show Mrs. Reynolds where to find the best shells? Hannah and I will catch up." Once Sophie was out of earshot, Michael turned back to Hannah. "Are you sure about this? About all of it? Because if we start down this path—" "I'm sure about Sophie," Hannah said, firmly. "I'm sure about wanting to help her heal, to see her smile, to be part of her life in whatever way is best for her." "And me?" She looked up at him, at the mix of hope and fear in his eyes. "I'm sure that I want to try. Slowly, carefully. One shell at a time." He smiled then, a real smile that reached his eyes and made him look years younger. Carefully, telegraphing his movements so she could pull away if she wanted to, he leaned down and kissed her. It was different from yesterday's desperate emotional kiss. Softer, sweeter, full of promise rather than pain. "Hannah! Daddy! Look at all the shells we found!" They broke apart, laughing as Sophie came running back with her dress pockets full of treasures. Mrs. Reynolds followed, carrying her own collection with dignified amusement. The four of them spent the next hour combing the beach, Sophie darting between them like a happy butterfly, showing each shell to Hannah for approval before adding it to their growing collection. Michael's hand would occasionally brush Hannah's as they walked, each touch sending little sparks through her skin. Later, as they headed back to the house for breakfast, Sophie skipping ahead with Mrs. Reynolds, Michael held Hannah back. "Stay," he said simply. "Not just for the summer. Stay and help us build something new." Hannah looked at the shell Sophie had given her, its broken edges somehow making it more beautiful. "Are you sure?" "No," he admitted with a small laugh. "I'm not sure about anything. Except that when I look at my daughter now, I see hope instead of just loss. When I look at you—" He touched her cheek gently. "When I look at you, I see possibilities I thought were gone forever." "Then yes," Hannah whispered. "I'll stay." Above them, seabirds wheeled against the morning sky. Sophie's laughter floated back to them on the breeze. And in that moment, Hannah understood what Margaret had meant about new stories growing alongside the old ones, not replacing them, but adding to them, creating a tapestry of love that was stronger for having been broken and mended. "Daddy! Hannah, hurry up! Mrs. Reynolds is making blueberry pancakes." They walked back to the house hand in hand, following the sound of Sophie's voice, stepping carefully around the shells she'd dropped like breadcrumbs marking the way home. The morning sun turned everything to gold, making even the broken things beautiful, and Hannah felt her heart expand with the certainty that sometimes the best love stories begin not with perfect moments, but with shattered pieces carefully gathered and made into something new. The board meeting was not going well. Michael's voice carried through his closed study door, tense and controlled as he addressed the unseen executives on his video call. Hannah lingered in the hallway, Sophie's lunch tray in her hands, debating whether to interrupt. The merger timeline is non-negotiable, Michael was saying. If Richardson Tech wants to back out now, a crash from upstairs made the decision for her. Setting down the tray, Hannah raced up the stairs, following the sound to Claire's old studio, a room that had remained locked since Hannah's arrival. Until now. Sophie stood in the doorway, tears streaming down her face, a broken picture frame at her feet. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I just wanted to see." Hannah carefully stepped over the glass, lifting Sophie away from the dangerous shards. "It's okay, Butterfly. Accidents happen, remember?" But Sophie was staring past her into the room that had been her mother's sanctuary. Hannah followed her gaze. The studio was frozen in time. Easels draped with dust cloths, unopened paint tubes arranged neatly on shelves, a half-finished canvas still waiting on a stand by the window. "I found Daddy's key," Sophie admitted, hiccuping through her tears. "I know I wasn't supposed to, but—" Footsteps thundered up the stairs. Michael appeared, his face draining of color when he saw the open door. "Sophie, what are you—" His voice caught as he took in the scene. "I'm sorry, Daddy. I didn't mean to break it." Michael moved forward as if in a trance, his eyes fixed on the broken frame. Hannah could see the photograph among the glass, Claire laughing, pregnant with Sophie, her hands covered in paint. "Michael," Hannah said softly, still holding Sophie. "Let me take her downstairs and clean up the glass, then maybe—" "No." His voice was strangled. Just go. Both of you. Please." Sophie began to cry harder. Hannah hesitated, torn, between respecting Michael's need for space and helping him face this moment. "Daddy's mad at me," Sophie whimpered as Hannah carried her downstairs. "No, Butterfly, he's just sad. Sometimes when grown-ups are very sad, they need a little time alone." Hannah brought Sophie to the kitchen, where Mrs. Reynolds immediately began making hot chocolate, her universal cure for emotional upheavals. While Sophie calmed down under the housekeeper's gentle attention, Hannah slipped back upstairs. She found Michael sitting on the floor of the studio, the broken frame in his hands. Carefully, she sat beside him. "I couldn't pack it up," he said without looking at her. "After the funeral, everyone said I should clear out her things, make a clean break, but I couldn't erase her." Hannah touched his arm gently. "You don't have to erase anything. Don't I?" He finally met her eyes, and the pain there made her breath catch. "What am I doing, Hannah? Starting something with you when I can't even let my wife's studio go?" "Love isn't a zero-sum game," she said quietly. "Having feelings for me doesn't diminish what you had with Claire." "Doesn't it? Because right now I feel like I'm betraying everyone. Claire's memory, Sophie's trust, your heart." Hannah took the frame from his hands, carefully extracting the photograph from the broken glass. "Look at her," she said, holding up the picture. "Really look. She's so full of joy, so alive. Would she want this room to be a shrine? Would she want Sophie to think of her mother's space as somewhere forbidden?" Michael's hands trembled as he touched the photograph. "She would hate it," he admitted. "She used to say art was meant to be lived with, not locked away. She'd have wanted Sophie to—" He broke off as footsteps approached. Sophie stood in the doorway, clutching her mother's old paintbrush that Hannah had given her weeks ago. "Can I come in?" she asked in a small voice. Michael held out his arms and Sophie ran to him. "I'm sorry I got mad, Princess. This room, it holds a lot of memories." "Good memories?" Sophie asked, touching the photograph. "The best memories." Michael's voice grew stronger. "Would you like to hear about this picture, about the day it was taken?" Sophie nodded eagerly, settling into her father's lap. Hannah started to stand to give them privacy, but Michael caught her hand. "Stay," he said softly. "Please." "So?" Hannah sat back down, her shoulder touching Michael's, as he told Sophie about the day Claire had decided their unborn baby needed to hear jazz while she painted. How she danced around the studio, paintbrush in hand, belly swaying to the music. She got paint everywhere, Michael remembered, a smile finally breaking through his grief. On the walls, on her clothes, on me when I tried to make her rest. "Like me with the cookies," Sophie exclaimed. "Exactly like that. Your mom believed making beautiful things should be a little messy." Something shifted in the air, as if a window had been opened in a long-closed room. Sophie looked around with new eyes, taking in her mother's space, not with fear now, but with growing curiosity. "Could we?" She hesitated, then gathered her courage. "Could we make this room happy again? Like Mommy would want?" Michael's arms tightened around his daughter. He looked at Hannah and she saw the question in his eyes. Was he ready for this? Was it time? "We could start small," Hannah suggested. "Maybe choose one of your mom's paintings to hang in your room, Sophie. And we could clean in here, let in some fresh air." The merger presentation, Michael remembered suddenly. The board meeting. "I'll handle it," Hannah said firmly. "You two take all the time you need." She stood, but Michael caught her hand again, pressing a kiss to her palm. The gesture was witnessed by Sophie, who showed no surprise, as if her father expressing affection for Hannah was the most natural thing in the world. "Thank you," he whispered. Hannah left them there, surrounded by Claire's creativity and memory, their voices following her down the hall as Sophie asked questions and Michael answered, each word helping to transform a shrine back into a studio, a locked room back into a space for living. In Michael's study, she found the merger document still open on his laptop. Having helped with enough of his presentations over the summer, she knew what needed to be done. For the next hour, she organized slides, updated projections, and finally emailed the board with a professionally worded request to reschedule. When she went to check on Michael and Sophie later, she found them sitting by the studio window. Sophie was carefully washing her mother's old brushes, while Michael sorted through canvases, telling stories about each painting. "Hannah," Sophie called out. "Look what we found." She held up a small canvas covered in tiny handprints. "It's me. Before I was born, Mommy put paint on her tummy and pressed it on the canvas. Daddy says I was dancing that day." "You've been dancing ever since," Michael said, smiling at his daughter. Then to Hannah, "The board? Rescheduled for next week. Family emergency." His eyes softened. "It was, wasn't it? A family emergency. And you knew exactly what we needed." Hannah moved to join them by the window where late afternoon sun streamed in, highlighting the dust motes that danced in the air like tiny stars. "Sometimes healing looks like opening doors," she said quietly. "Even the scary ones." Sophie held up another paintbrush, this one still crusty with years-old purple paint. "Can we make this room our special place? All of us?" Hannah looked at Michael, letting him answer. "Yes," he said, his voice firm despite the tears in his eyes. "Yes, we can make it our special place, a place for old memories and new ones." He pulled Sophie into his lap, making room for Hannah to sit beside them. Together they watched the sun paint golden stripes across Claire's unfinished canvas, turning the dust cloths into clouds and the old paint tubes into treasures waiting to be rediscovered. Outside, the summer storm that had been threatening all day finally broke, rain pattering against the windows. But inside the studio, surrounded by art and memories and possibilities, Hannah felt nothing but warmth. She understood now that love wasn't about replacing or forgetting. It was about making room, about opening doors, about letting the light in one brush stroke at a time. The invitation to the annual Hamptons Children's Hospital benefit arrived on a Tuesday morning, its gold lettering catching the sunlight. Hannah watched Michael's face as he read it, noting the subtle tension in his jaw. "Claire founded the children's art therapy program there," he said quietly, running his fingers over the embossed paper. They're dedicating a new wing in her name. Hannah set down her coffee cup. They were in the kitchen, Sophie's cheerful humming drifting down from upstairs where she was getting ready for their daily beach walk. The past week since opening the studio had been filled with small steps forward, sorting through Claire's art supplies, finding homes for finished paintings, creating a space where old memories could live alongside new ones. "When is it?" Hannah asked. "Saturday." Michael looked up at her. "Everyone will be there. The board members, hospital trustees, Margaret." The unspoken question hung in the air between them. Their relationship was no longer a secret within the household, but they hadn't yet appeared together at any public events. The benefit would change that. "I could stay home with Sophie," Hannah offered, though the words tasted bitter. "No." Michael's response was immediate. "I mean, unless you want to, but I'd like you there. Both of you, it's just complicated." He reached across the counter, taking her hand. "Everything worth having usually is." "Daddy." Sophie's voice preceded her into the kitchen. "Can I wear my butterfly dress to the beach?" "Not today, Princess, but maybe you could wear it to a special party this weekend." Michael caught Hannah's eye. "If you'd like to go with Hannah and me?" Sophie's face lit up. "A party? Will there be other kids?" "Lots of them," Michael assured her. "And something else special, too. They are naming part of the hospital after Mommy." Sophie grew quiet, processing this. "Because she helped sick kids feel better? With art?" "That's right. She believed art could help heal people's hearts when they were hurting." "Like how Hannah helps heal our hearts?" Sophie asked. Innocently, the question landed like a stone in still water, ripples of emotion spreading outward. Michael's hand tightened on Hannah's. "Yes, butterfly," he said softly. "Very much like that." Later that morning, after their beach walk, Hannah found herself in Claire's studio with Sophie. They were organizing art supplies when Sophie discovered a box of old photographs. "Look." She held up a picture of Claire at the hospital, surrounded by children holding paintings. Her smile was radiant, full of life and purpose. "She was beautiful," Hannah said truthfully. "Like you," Sophie replied, sorting through more photos. "But different too. Like how butterflies can be different colors but still be beautiful." Hannah's throat tightened. Before she could respond, another voice came from the doorway. "She's right, you know." They turned to find Margaret standing there, looking somehow softer than usual. "Grandma!" Sophie ran to her, photos still clutched in her hands. "Look what we found." Margaret entered the studio slowly, her eyes taking in the changes they'd made. The room was brighter now, Claire's finished paintings displayed with love, her supplies organized and accessible. A corner had been set up for Sophie, with her own small easel and art materials. "You've been busy in here," Margaret observed, but there was no accusation in her tone. "Hannah helped me clean Mommy's brushes," Sophie explained proudly. "And Daddy told me stories about every painting." Margaret picked up the photograph of Claire at the hospital. "I remember this day. She was so passionate about the program, believed every child deserved a chance to express their pain through art." She looked directly at Hannah. "Rather like what you've been doing with Sophie." Hannah met her gaze steadily. "Claire showed us the way. We're just following her path." Something shifted in Margaret's expression. She sat down in Claire's old chair, pulling Sophie into her lap. "The benefit on Saturday," she said carefully. "People will talk." "They already do," Hannah replied. "Yes, but this will be different, more public, more—" Margaret stroked Sophie's hair. "More final in some ways, like acknowledging that life goes on." "Isn't that what Claire would have wanted?" Margaret was quiet for a long moment. "You know, I fought so hard to keep everything exactly as it was when she died, as if preserving every detail could somehow keep her with us, but watching Sophie this past summer," she hugged her granddaughter closer. "I see her laugh again. Really laugh like Claire used to. and I realized that maybe the best way to honor Claire is to let joy back into this family. Hannah felt tears prick her eyes. Mrs. Carter. Margaret, the older woman corrected. I think it's time you called me Margaret. She stood, setting Sophie down gently. Now about the benefit. That butterfly dress won't do for such a formal occasion. Perhaps we should go shopping, all of us? Sophie bounced with excitement. Can we, Hannah? Please. Hannah looked at Margaret, seeing the olive branch for what it was. I'd like that very much. The afternoon found them at an upscale boutique in Southampton, Sophie twirling in party dresses while Margaret offered surprisingly warm commentary. Hannah discovered that Claire's mother had a sharp wit and an eye for fashion that made the experience both educational and entertaining. This one, Margaret declared, as Sophie emerged in a pale blue dress with delicate silver embroidery. It reminds me of the dress Claire wore to her first gallery opening, Hannah finished, remembering a photograph she'd seen in the studio. Margaret's eyes met hers in the mirror. Yes. How did you? Michael told me the story. How nervous she was, how she almost changed at the last minute, but you convinced her she was meant to shine that night. And she did. Margaret touched the soft fabric of Sophie's dress. Just like this little one will. Sophie beamed at her reflection. Can I show Daddy when we get home? Of course, Butterfly, Hannah said. But first, I think we need to find something for your grandma and me, too. What do you think? They spent another hour choosing dresses, Sophie offering serious opinions on colors and styles. By the time they left the boutique, the sun was setting over the harbor, casting long shadows across the sidewalk. Hannah? Margaret said as they walked to the car. Thank you. For what? For not trying to erase her. For helping them remember Claire with love instead of just grief. She watched Sophie skip ahead of them. For making room in their hearts, without trying to replace what was already there. Hannah felt tears threaten again. I never could replace her, I wouldn't want to. No, Margaret agreed softly. But maybe you can help build something new. Something that honors what was while embracing what could be. That evening, after Sophie had proudly shown Michael her dress and gone to bed, Hannah found him in the studio. He was looking at the hospital photograph, his expression thoughtful. Margaret took us shopping today, she said, moving to stand beside him. I heard. He turned to her, eyes serious. Are you sure about Saturday? About facing everyone? Hannah touched the photograph gently. Claire built something beautiful at that hospital. She helped children heal through art. How could I not want to honor that? Michael pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her temple. You're remarkable. You know that? No, Hannah said softly. I just understand that love doesn't have to be either or. It can be both and. We can celebrate Claire's legacy while building our own future. Outside, the last light of day painted the sky in shades of pink and gold. In the distance, they could hear Sophie's voice drifting down from her room, singing a song about butterflies and new beginnings. Our future, Michael repeated, the words full of promise and possibility. I like the sound of that. Hannah leaned into him, breathing in the moment. Saturday would bring its own challenges, its own opportunities for growth and healing. But for now, standing in Claire's studio with Michael's arms around her, she felt nothing but peace, and the quiet certainty that sometimes the best love stories are the ones that make room for all the chapters, even the ones written in memory. The Hampton Bay Children's Hospital glowed like a jewel against the twilight sky. Hannah stood before the mirror in the hospital's powder room, adjusting the silver dress Margaret had helped her choose. The elegant gown hugged her curves before flowing gracefully to the floor, its color reminiscent of moonlight on water. You look beautiful, Sophie declared, perched on a velvet settee in her blue dress, like a princess in one of our stories. Hannah smiled, though her hands trembled slightly as she smoothed her hair. You're the real princess tonight, Butterfly. Are you scared? Sophie asked with characteristic perception. Because of what people might say? Before Hannah could respond, Margaret entered, resplendent in deep purple. Let them talk, she said firmly. This family has had enough of living in shadows. The three of them made their way to the hospital's grand ballroom, where Michael waited by the entrance. His sharp intake of breath when he saw Hannah made her cheeks flush. You're stunning, he whispered, kissing her cheek. Then, to Sophie, and you, princess, are the belle of the ball. Inside the ballroom was transformed. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over elegant table settings, while Claire's artwork, donated to the hospital over the years, adorned the walls. In one corner, a string quartet played softly. The whispers started almost immediately. Hannah could feel the weight of countless eyes following their every move as Michael led them to their table near the front. Board members and hospital trustees nodded politely, their expressions varying from curiosity to barely concealed judgment. Michael, a smooth voice called out, and this must be the famous Hannah we've heard so much about. The speaker was a distinguished man in his 60s, Richard Davidson, Hannah recognized from Michael's video calls, the board member who'd been most resistant to the merger. Richard, Michael acknowledged, his hand finding Hannah's lower back protectively. Yes, this is Hannah Mitchell. Hannah, Richard Davidson, head of our board. Davidson's scrutiny was razor sharp. Quite a change from your usual social circle, Michael, although I suppose youth has its advantages. Before Michael could respond, Sophie tugged at Davidson's sleeve. Do you want to see my shell collection? Hannah's teaching me how to find the best ones. Even the broken ones can be beautiful. The innocent intervention diffused the tension. Davidson's face softened as he knelt to Sophie's level. Is that so? Perhaps you could tell me more about these shells during dinner. The evening progressed with careful diplomacy. Hannah found herself engaged in conversations about child psychology with hospital staff, her genuine interest in their work gradually winning over even the most skeptical observers. Then came the speeches. Michael took the podium, his voice strong and clear as he spoke about Claire's vision for the art therapy program. My late wife believed that healing comes in many forms, he said. That sometimes the deepest wounds require more than medicine. They need color, creativity, and the freedom to express what words cannot. His eyes found Hannah's in the crowd. Claire taught me that love is not a finite resource, that our hearts have an infinite capacity to grow, to heal, to embrace new joy while honoring cherished memories. The Claire Carter Memorial Wing will stand as a testament to that belief. Hannah felt tears slip down her cheeks. Sophie crawled into her lap, while Margaret reached across the table to squeeze her hand. And so, Michael continued, it feels right that tonight, as we dedicate this space to Claire's memory, we also celebrate new beginnings. The art therapy program she started will expand, reaching more children than ever before. And the family she loves so dearly. His voice caught slightly. We're learning to live fully again, to paint with all the colors life offers. I think she would be proud of that. The applause was genuine, touched with understanding. Hannah saw several people dabbing at their eyes, including Davidson. Later, during the dancing, Michael pulled Hannah onto the floor. As they swayed to the music, she could still feel people watching, but it mattered less now. You're trembling, Michael murmured. Good trembling, she assured him, like butterflies emerging from cocoons. He smiled at the metaphor. Sophie's rubbing off on you. Sophie, Claire, you, Margaret, you've all changed me, made me understand that love isn't about filling empty spaces. It's about creating new ones. Michael's arms tightened around her. Speaking of new spaces, I've been thinking about the fall. Hannah's heart skipped. They hadn't discussed what would happen when summer ended, when her original contract expired. The merger's almost complete, he continued. And I've been offered a position overseeing our new children's technology initiative. It would mean more time at home, regular hours. Michael, move in with us, he said quietly. Not as Sophie's nanny, but as as part of our family. Help me raise her, love her, show her that happiness can have many chapters." Before Hannah could respond, a small hand tugged at her dress. Sophie stood there, eyes bright with hope. "Please say yes," she whispered. "We need you." Hannah knelt, gathering Sophie close. "Oh, Butterfly, I need you too, both of you." "Is that a yes?" Michael asked, joining them on the dance floor, uncaring of the spectacle they must be making. "Yes," Hannah breathed. "Yes to all of it." Sophie threw her arms around them both. Over her head, Hannah saw Margaret watching from their table, tears streaming unashamedly down her face. "Claire would approve," the older woman mouthed silently. As if in response, the quartet began playing Claire's favorite song, something Michael had mentioned once in passing. Hannah recognized it from a video they'd found in the studio, of Claire dancing with a toddling Sophie. "Dance with me?" Sophie asked, holding out her hands. They moved together, the three of them, then four as Margaret joined them. Other couples stepped back, creating space for their impromptu family dance. Hannah saw Davidson smiling, saw the hospital trustees nodding approvingly, saw the last walls of resistance crumbling in the face of such obvious joy. Later that night, after Sophie had fallen asleep in the car on the way home, Hannah found herself back in Claire's studio. The moonlight streamed through the windows, illuminating the paintings on the walls, Claire's work living on, touching lives, creating beauty. "Thank you," she whispered to the quiet room, "for showing us the way, for teaching us that love multiplies, it doesn't divide, for giving me the chance to love them too." A warm breeze stirred the curtains, carrying the scent of summer roses. Somewhere in the garden, a wind chime played a gentle melody, and Hannah could have sworn she felt it. A blessing, a permission, a passing of the torch from one kind of love to another. The future stretched before them now, not as a replacement for what was lost, but as a new canvas waiting to be filled with colors all their own. And in that moment, Hannah knew with perfect clarity that sometimes the most beautiful stories are the ones written in the spaces between heartbeats, in the pause between what was and what could be, in the delicate dance of remembering and becoming. The last day of summer dawned golden over the Hamptons. Hannah stood on the beach watching Sophie chase waves in the early morning light. The little girl's laughter carried on the breeze, a sound that had become as natural as breathing. "I can't believe how much she's grown," Margaret said, joining Hannah at the water's edge. She carried 2 steaming cups of coffee, offering one to Hannah. "Thank you." Hannah accepted the coffee, remembering a time when such a simple gesture from Margaret would have seemed impossible. Not just in height. Her heart has grown too. They watched as Sophie discovered a perfect shell, holding it up triumphantly. "Hannah, look, it's heart-shaped." "The best find yet, Butterfly," Hannah called back. "Perfect for your collection." The shell collection had moved from Hannah's room to the studio, arranged carefully on shelves alongside Claire's paintbrushes and Sophie's growing collection of artwork. The space had become their family's heart, where past and present danced together in peaceful harmony. "The movers are coming today?" Margaret asked, though she knew the answer. Hannah nodded. "Just for my apartment in the city, though there's not much to move, mostly books and winter clothes." "And your mother arrives tomorrow for the ceremony?" "Yes. She's excited to finally meet everyone." Hannah smiled, remembering her mother's tearful joy when she'd explained how a summer job had transformed into something so much more. Sophie ran up to them, breathless and damp from the waves. "Grandma, will you help me get ready for the party later? I want to wear my butterfly clip, the one Mommy used to wear." "Of course, darling." Margaret brushed sand from Sophie's cheek. "Your mother loved that clip. She wore it the day she married your father." "And now Hannah can wear it too," Sophie said with simple certainty, "since she's marrying Daddy and becoming my other mommy." Hannah's heart swelled. The proposal had come just last week here on this same beach. Michael had gotten down on one knee in the surf, Sophie holding the ring box, Margaret watching with happy tears from the shore. It hadn't been a surprise. They'd discussed marriage, family, future, but the moment had been magical nonetheless. "There you all are," Michael's voice called from behind them, He joined their little group, pressing a kiss to Hannah's temple. The caterers are here early. Something about the cake needing special setup. The cake. Sophie's eyes widened. Can I see it? Not yet, princess, but I promise it will be worth the wait. Hannah knew it would be. The design had been Sophie's idea, tiers of blue and silver, decorated with handmade sugar butterflies that seemed to take flight around the cake. A tribute to new beginnings, to transformation, to the beautiful things that could emerge from life's cocoons. I should head up, Margaret said. Those flower arrangements won't arrange themselves. She hugged Sophie, then surprised Hannah with an embrace. See you both at the house. As Margaret walked back up the beach path, Michael pulled Hannah close. Having second thoughts? About becoming Mrs. Carter? Never. She leaned into him, watching Sophie chase sandpipers. About having the engagement party here instead of somewhere more traditional? Maybe a tiny butterfly flutter. Hey. He turned, her to face him. This beach is where we fell in love, where Sophie learned to swim again, where you helped us all remember how to live fully. Where else would we celebrate? Hannah touched the ring on her finger, a beautiful sapphire surrounded by tiny diamonds. Not a replacement for his first wedding ring, which sat safely in a special box in Sophie's room, but something new. Something that honored the past while embracing the future. I found Claire's journal yesterday, she said softly, while we were organizing the studio. I didn't read it, but there was something written on the cover that made me cry. What was it? Love is not a portrait, it's a garden. It grows, changes, makes room for new blooms without erasing what was planted before. Michael's arms tightened around her. She would have loved you, you know. Your kindness, your patience, the way you love Sophie. I wish I could have known her. You do know her, he said gently. Through Sophie's laugh, through her art, through the way she taught us all that. Love never really leaves, it just transforms like a butterfly, Sophie finished, rejoining them with her shell collection. Daddy, can we show Hannah the surprise now? Please? Michael checked his watch. Actually, Princess, this might be the perfect time. He led them up the beach path, but instead of turning toward the house, they headed for the studio. Hannah noticed Sophie practically vibrating with excitement. Close your eyes, Michael instructed when they reached the door. Hannah complied, letting them guide her inside. The studio's familiar scents, paint, ocean air, memories wrapped around her. Okay, Sophie whispered. Open them. Hannah opened her eyes and gasped. The wall they'd left empty, the one Claire had been planning to paint before she died, was now covered with a mural. Butterflies of all sizes and colors took flight across the surface, each one unique, each one beautiful. And in the center, painted with delicate care, were 3 figures holding hands, a man, a woman, and a little girl. Sophie and I have been working on it all week, Michael explained, with some help from Margaret and Mrs. Reynolds. And Mommy helped too, Sophie added solemnly, because she sends us butterflies to show she's happy. Hannah touched the mural with trembling fingers. The butterflies seemed to shimmer in the morning light streaming through the windows. It's not finished, Michael said softly. We left. Room for more butterflies, more colors, more stories to add as our family grows? Our family, Hannah repeated, the words feeling like a prayer. Sophie tugged her down to whisper in her ear. See, sometimes the best stories have more than one mommy, more than one kind of love. That's what makes them special. Hannah gathered Sophie into her arms, reaching for Michael with her free hand. Together they stood before the mural, 3 hearts, beating in rhythm while outside the studio windows butterflies danced in the summer breeze. Real ones, their wings catching the light like promises taking flight. The engagement party would begin soon. Friends and family would gather to celebrate not just Hannah and Michael's love, but the transformation of grief into growth, of loss into new life, of broken pieces into something whole and beautiful. But for now, in this moment, Hannah held her family close and gave thanks for summer jobs that turned into forever homes, for little girls who believed in butterfly magic, for widowers brave enough to love again, for mothers-in-law who learned to make room in their hearts, and for the infinite capacity of love to heal, to grow, to transform. "I love you," she whispered. The words meant for all of them. For Michael and Sophie, for Margaret waiting at the house, for Claire watching from wherever butterflies dance when their wings are tired. "We love you too," they answered. Michael's voice strong and sure, Sophie's sweet and clear, and in the gentle breeze that stirred the curtains, Hannah could have sworn she heard an echo of blessing, of welcome, of the eternal truth that love, in all its forms, is the greatest art of all. Above them, the butterflies on the mural seemed to take flight, carrying their stories, past, present, and future, into the endless summer sky, where all love stories live forever, transforming and growing, but never truly ending. Fei Yu had the choice between living a love without conflict from the start, or facing deep challenges that turn a love story into something extraordinarily special like Hannah and Michael's. Which path would you choose and why? Your participation in the channel is very important. Please leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to our channel and leave a comment below letting us know what you thought. Your feedback and support mean a lot to us. Stay tuned for more exciting stories.